We've got fireworks going off outside and around the UFC as news is starting to swirl about the possibility of Jorge Masvidal stepping in to take on Kamaru Usman at UFC 251. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dr. Brian Suter, and this is your #1 stop for learning about everything related to sports injuries and sports medicine news. When we saw these photos pop up Saturday evening of Masvidal undergoing COVID-19 testing, and then one of his friends sharing this photo supposedly of a negative test, there was talk going around that Masvidal had tested negative for COVID-19, further adding to the speculation of him stepping in to fight Kamaru Usman. In this video, I'm going to teach you guys about this test specifically and why this doesn't mean that whoever took this test does not have COVID-19. Be sure and go subscribe to stay up to date with my latest videos and check out my Twitter page for more real-time sports injury analyses. And let's get started. This picture that was shared by one of Masvidal's friends is an antibody test. When understanding COVID-19 testing, we have to break it down into two different types: molecular testing and serologic testing. The molecular testing is looking for active virus. This is what we do when we wonder if somebody currently has the infection. This is the test that they're doing to put the Q-tip back up into the nose or swab in the throat, and even some recent development with saliva tests. On the other hand, the serologic test is looking for antibodies that signify somebody's body has already mounted an immune response to the COVID-19 virus. It's important to understand these two distinctions here because what we saw the picture of is a serologic test. It's a test looking for antibodies, and this test being negative does not rule out the person having the infection. So all these stories about Masvidal testing negative for COVID-19 based on this picture is not true. We would need to have the actual molecular test with the swab to say whether or not he currently, or whoever's test this was, has or doesn't have the virus. Now, the specific markings on this picture also mean something. Of course, the C indicates that this test was negative, but then we also see this G and the M. This corresponds to the specific type of antibody that's being assessed for. Antibodies are part of our more specific, tailored immune response to things like viruses and bacteria. Whenever we're first exposed to a pathogen, we mount this initial response that's very non-specific and just very broad. But as our body fights the infection, we then start to generate antibodies specifically targeting that virus or bacteria that we're trying to fight. In this case, the coronavirus has little proteins on its surface, and our body makes these antibodies to specifically recognize those different proteins on the virus. Now, there's a number of different types of antibodies, and they all have specific purposes and shapes to them. In this case, this test is looking for the G and the M antibody. The IgM antibody is the one that's produced first whenever we're fighting these infections. Testing positive for IgM antibodies can be a sign that somebody has started to build this immune response to a current infection or a very recent one. This is followed shortly by the IgG antibodies, and this is typically what we're looking for to determine whether or not somebody previously had the infection. So all this test is doing is specifically looking for the antibodies that signify that the person has mounted an immune response, whether it's recent or in the past. With the novel coronavirus, this is somewhere around 10 days at the earliest, but can be up to weeks, if ever, that our body generates enough of these antibodies to be able to sense it and measure it on a test. This test in no way can rule out that somebody currently has the infection. It's just part of the broader screening process to see if these individuals have previously been exposed. And remember, because this virus is so new, we don't really understand how long these antibodies stick around and how much long-term immunity this provides. Whenever we get a flu vaccine, our body generates these antibodies that can remember how to fight off that specific flu virus. Those antibodies stick around and provide that immunity throughout that flu season. So hopefully in the case of the novel coronavirus, these antibodies stick around long enough and provide long-term immunity, but unfortunately it just hasn't been long enough for us to know that for sure. The photo here where Masvidal looks like he's being pricked in the finger, that's to get a drop of blood to do this antibody test. We didn't see pictures of him undergoing the molecular test to again look for the active virus. But if we hear about that test being negative, then we can be more confident that he doesn't currently have the infection. Nonetheless, though, this is exciting. Of course, it was terrible news to hear about Gilbert Burns not being able to fight because of what's going on. But if the UFC is able to make this happen, it's going to be an absolute Hail Mary. I hope all these guys test negative. I hope we can make this happen and see an awesome fight next weekend. That's it for the video, everybody. Thank you as always for watching, and I hope you learned something here about antibodies and these different types of tests. Hopefully we get some updates soon about the possibility of this fight, and I'll see you in the next video.